Hello, everyone. I'm Polumi, and I would like to welcome everyone to our fireside chat on 2021 trends, continuous security validation, practical strategies, and tactics. One area where cyber attackers have an edge is that the organizations test some of the time, and hackers are trying to attack all of the time. Do you have continuous security validation providing continuous and proactive security? For today's session, we have Bikash Barai, co-founder of Fire Compass, Anant MS, CISO Jana Bank, and Akhil Verma, CISO Airtel Payments Bank with us as speakers who will help us understand the problem, CISO challenges, and how they are solving this. Bikash Barai is the co-founder of Fire Compass, a SaaS platform for continuous automated red teaming and attack surface management. Earlier, he founded IVIS and IDG Ventures, backed companies that were later acquired by Digital, and now that is Synopsys. He is credited for several innovations in the domain of IT security and has multiple patents in USPTO under his name, and he has received recognition from UC Berkeley, Intel, NASCOM, Red Herring, TIE, Fortune 40 under 40, etc. Our next speaker, Anant, is a security veteran with over 25 plus years of experience. He has worked in some of the large IT companies, both in India and overseas, and has been helping organizations to improve security posture by advising them on government risk and compliance. Our third speaker, Akhil, is a security professional with expertise in BFSI sector and close to 16 plus years of experience. In his career, he has contributed to security operations, security policy implementation, SLA management, risk management and compliance, and software development. Akhil has worked with all kinds of banking model in India, like public sector banks, small finance banks, and payments bank. Now, before we start our session, I request everyone during the session to add their questions in the chat, and we will answer them from time to time or at the end of the session. I will now request Bikash to start the session.
Thanks, Polome. So welcome everybody. We will try to focus today on discussing on some of those new trends which we are seeing. I mean, you know that vulnerability management as a field exists for like 2 decades right now. So we have all these automation, VA, pen test, and stuff like that for last 2 decades. But still, if you see that even the most well-known organizations with really great security teams and tools, etc., in place, even they are getting compromised. So clearly, it is a very hard problem, and in a way, it's also a very unfair battle. And the reason why it is an unfair battle is that the attacker has to just win once, but we as defenders have to win every time. And that's a kind of game. If we play, you will never do it in real life, but as a CISO, as a security professional, you chose to be in a game like that. So it's a very unfair battle. And on top of it, the maturity of the industry is gradually evolving. The management alignment towards security is also gradually evolving. So we are in a way in a very tough battle with less of ammunition. So how do we survive in this? What are the new trends? So our focus today will be more on discussing some of those new trends which we are seeing. What could the future be like? We obviously have seen the regular stuff and doing the regular stuff in our life for last couple of decades. Our today's focus is on discussing what's those new things which is happening right now. What should we look out for in the future? So that's the broad goal, and we have a very interesting set of speakers who are not just security leaders, but they themselves are very hands-on. They have very deep insights. So we'd love to hear more from Akhil and Anant on their insights. So before we get into that, let's have a quick small introduction from Akhil and Anant, and then we will get into the discussion. So Akhil, so please
Yeah,
share a little bit about yourself.
yeah. Hello everyone, Akhil this side. So I'm working as a CISO in Airtel Payments Bank. As Paul May has mentioned, my experience till now, my entire journey, means professional journey, is in a banking sector, which is you can say it's highly regulated. And thanks to RBI for contributing those things. And yeah, Vikas has mentioned correctly, like it's a battle between getting success every time versus it's a one time for the bad actors. So yeah, it's a we have chosen that field to be in this type of game, which is definitely it's interesting as well as a thrilling type of thing. So yeah, a lot of things going on during the current scenario thanks to COVID and all the scenarios. So yeah, security threats it's getting enhanced, and the different new modus operandi of the frauds are also appearing. So yeah, looking forward for this chat, and accordingly we'll just going forward we'll see means whatever the value additions we are taking during this thing, and after that how we can evolve, we can learn more something.
Thanks, Akhil. And Anant,
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Lucas. Good afternoon, everyone. Anand this side. As Palami introduced, I'm currently the CISO of Jana Small Finance Bank. Um, I have been an IT professional banker for the last few years. So what I've seen is traditionally, things are evolving both from a business perspective and also from the threat perspective. The solution seems to be predominantly what we have followed for many decades now, having the proper controls and things like that. The continuous security validation, which is the topic for the day, is appropriate given the recent cyber breaches we have seen, where some of the things were very easy to fix, but unfortunately, due to the business challenges or the speed of business movement, we are not able to do. As a CISO, as Akhil said, we are like the good guys standing to protect the organization on one side and all the things. So for us, the success criteria is that if we are able to convince the management that we are at a particular risk level and get appropriate attention, I think that's a big success that we will all see. No organization, I think, is immune to any kind of threats. Looking forward
great,
to further discussion in this moment. Thanks, Vikram.
great, wonderful, thanks. So let's structure the discussion into four major parts. One is we will initially discuss a little bit on some of those key reasons for these breaches. So one interesting thing is that when you see a breach of XYZ company has happened, and this is the reason why the breach has happened, that's only a part of the story. When you go deeper, the story has a lot more dimension and color to that. It is something like watching a black and white picture versus a 3D immersive. So the depth of the reality is way more, but those things don't really come out in the news. I mean, of course, you in the if you are if you know the specific organizations, etc., you will get to know the details of it. So what we'll try to do today is we'll try to focus on some of those breaches where we have certain insights for whatever be the reason, either we know those organizations in some manner, etc., and share those deeper insights which generally don't come out in public. So some of the key reasons for those breaches which are not always essentially out known to the public, that's one. The second thing which we'll discuss is what are some of the key trends in vulnerability management. We have today's focus as continuous security validation, but we will go outside of that also a little bit and discuss what are the other broader trends in vulnerability management. And then third, we will discuss on the critical capabilities. If you really want to build a security program from the perspective of identifying threats, so in NIST we have identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Our primary focus will be suppose identify and the vulnerability management more specifically within that. So in vulnerability management, what are the critical capabilities that we should have? So that's the third thing. And finally, we'll discuss on some of the success factors. So broadly, we will structure this discussion into four parts. Some of those deeper insights and key reasons why breaches are happening. Number two, the key trends in vulnerability management, which we should look out for in 2021. And third is a kind of critical capability and a high level reference architecture. And fourth is success factors. So that's broadly how we will structure the discussion. So let's start with the first part. So um, uh, Akhil, let's start with you. Can you share some of those interesting insights in a breach which for some reason you are aware of because of being in the ecosystem and having friends within the industry, etc., where you have deeper insights? Can you share some of those interesting things which are generally not out there public and people don't get to know what's the reality and actual reason for the breaches?
So yeah, sure. Thanks, Vikas. See, I'll not say like it's not available and everybody is not aware, but yeah, it's a modus operandi how it is there. That basis we can discuss. And one thing before that, I'll say like a lot of threat vectors and all these things we are telling that it is getting changed and different new modalities and all those things are coming. But still, some of the things, whatever our basic concept is still it's remains same. Like if you can just means it is in a public network, but still without taking the name of any particular organization, which most of the people can correlate anyway. One incident was there in somewhere in July, August 2020, which was for a very popular micro blogging platform. So it was a targeted and what they targeted, it was like a spear phishing attack for them, for the some of the employee. And they have taken, means they were trying to, means focusing, or they were trying to exploit the human vulnerability in that case. They gained that access of their credentials from that very popular microblogging platform, and after that they have used those credentials and log into the system, their internal system, and that breach happened and all those things. So basically, yeah, it's a modality could be different because they have sent that phone related spear phishing attack, something they have sent that SMS and all those credentials, they got it after that. So yeah, but here common factor it was there like human vulnerability, which is always in a security professions, always we are talking it's a most vulnerable area, whatever the solutions and all those things. So how to identify those things and how to aware and other thing. Another one thing was there during immediately after lockdown, like in March it is started suddenly, means everybody was started like presently we are interacting over this meeting platform. So one of the very popular, and that time it's the most popular platform, immediately after 1 month of that lockdown, it is started there around more than some 4 to 5 lakh account got breached. And what was the reason for that? It was not like okay, there some server, there some credential, means their systems got hacked. What happened? So that whatever attack was there, that was something credential stuffing attack. So they that credentials they got in some other leaked site, and after that those people, means peoples have used those credentials to log in into that particular meeting site, and they got this credential. That means it is indicating still as a human nature for us, like we are using one password in this side, and after that maybe years together we may not be changing those things, or we are using that repeated thing. So because whatever the credential leak was there in that particular site, it's not like all it was getting success in that particular meeting platform. But yeah, most of the thing around 5 lakh or 6 lakh some news was there. So again that modality. So these were some two things, and there are a lot of things in India also, that famous sweet shop and all these incident happened. So it's a different scenario it happened. But yeah, still I am still firmly believe on that basic concept. Like if a lot of solutions, a lot of things we are, but if we are not making our basic thing as a strong, sometimes it is creating a problem for us as good as we are going ahead then also.
Great.
Yeah.
So Akhil, just to add to what you mentioned, so that's a very interesting point that these leaked credentials is one of the interesting reasons. And I would like to add two things on top of that. For leaked credentials, based on my experience and my observations, I've seen two kinds of attacks happening with leaked credentials. One is a simple one and another is a complex one. Let me start with the simple one. Simple one is for quite a few of these e-commerce sites. It is very common. There's these leaked passwords are used by the attacker and to go and use their credits.
Hmm.
So
Good.
this is something which is happening very commonly. So this is a very simple one, but I'll give you another example of a complex one, which is for financial services organization. So there was this leaked password, a few hundred leaked passwords in the dark web, and then one of the internal applications was accidentally natted online. That was not supposed to be accessible online, but it was somehow natted online. For some reason, somebody did an exception and put it up online. Security team was not aware of it, and out of those few hundred passwords, one password worked, and with that the attacker could get some level of access, which is the normal user level access. But then with that, on doing dynamic application security testing, you could get a directory traversal vulnerability, and in one of the directories there was base 64 encoded logs. Now people do base 64 encoding still now, and then that was decoded, and once you decode that and if you do static analysis, you get the keys, the admin keys of the application. Now look at this. This is like a 6-7 stage attack. You start with a leaked password and a accidentally natted application, and then you go do a multi-stage attack and eventually get access to the full customer database of the organization. So with leaked passwords, a lot of interesting things could be done. There could be some very simple ones to some very complex ones. And
Mm.
Anand, do you want to add some of the interesting reasons which you are seeing for which is causing breaches, either small or
Sure.
big?
So one of the thing as a banker, right? One of the concerns that I always have is uh, we don't have the data stored in the four walls anymore, right? It is omnipresent, and it is with different set of people. You know, whether they are our partners or with our service providers, they all have the data that belongs to the bank. And what we have seen, is that at least going with some of the well publicized, breaches that came out in the end of last year, December, supply chain issues are there where the attack might not come directly on the organization, but it could come through a service provider. And service providers don't have so much of, importance for security. For them, security is I have kept a computer behind a locked door, and that's all it is, right? So no one worries about it. So these are some of the things that increase the risk profile for us. And the other thing is, the attacks are not just anymore with finance. If you do a Google or some search, you'll see attacks are across various, parts, including, in the recent past, some of the pharmaceutical companies were attacked when we were talking about the vaccine, right? So it's not just only for finance. It's more of, reputation. It is more of the requirement is no more for finance. It's gone beyond that, right? It's also very competitive nation state actors. So they all play a part of it. And what we have seen is still the basics. If you are able to do, many of this can be avoided. So, if you are able to prevent somebody, as you rightly pointed out, it's a 7-stage attack. If somebody till the 7th stage were not able to identify it, then there's nothing much that's happening, right?
Great. And Anand, to add to, you mentioned about the third party and supply chain, right? So here is one interesting thing which we observed. We see this shadow IT causing breaches. And a lot of times in matured organizations, if you see that an organization got compromised because of something simple, it was generally a shadow IT. Because in a mature organization, they wouldn't miss such kind of vulnerabilities. So typically shadow IT causes a lot of breaches like that. But here's another interesting thing which we noticed sometime back, around a year back, which is not shadow IT, but it's a shadow vendor. So I'll explain. I don't know if the industry uses a term like shadow vendor. So let me explain what do I mean by that. So what we noticed was for a specific bank, one of the database was out there which had their data. So once we, and also that had data of 3 other banks. In fact, a lot more, many other banks. So when we went and informed these banks, to give you an example, one of the banks came back and said, you know what, I mean, this data is ours, but then, I mean, looks like this is ours, but then this IP is not ours. And once they figured out like which IP it belongs to, the specific organization, they said, you know what, this is not even our vendor. They're not part of our vendor list. But once they went and dug deep, they realized that the business, one of the tech, or the business teams was doing a POC with these guys. And since it was a POC, it's not part of the vendor list. And as you know, that if you are doing a POC, most of the times the vendors are not going to be part of your third-party vendor management program, right?
Yes.
And that's the general scenario. And because of that, a major data exposure happened. So this is something which is less common, but we are seeing a lot of kind of shadow vendors also coming up, where people don't even know that that vendor is somebody who has their data. So let's move on to the next part, which is on some of the key trends. So Akhil, what do you consider as some of the key trends which we should look out for in 2021?
Yeah. So trend, we can say like this side vendor obviously one, but before that I would like to add one more point, which in continuation
Sure,
in your
sure,
earlier point, like shadow
perfect.
vendor. So POC side, whatever you have seen is the one thing, but it's a live example in my one of my earlier organization without taking name. Okay, so in that organization, we have seen in the core banking SIT environment, I got the live data of very well-known Bank of India. Okay, it was a live data. So when we were doing the testing of some of the things, we got that okay, in SIT, when first we thought okay, this could be some test data somebody have put, but after that it looked like IFSC code of that particular some other bank, because that vendor is a common for some other 2 3 banks also. They might have supplied that core banking solution to other bank also. So that data. So now the thing is, earlier at the time of doing this POC or doing this empanelment and all those things we are doing, but after that, how much access we are providing, I don't know how many of we are checking exactly, including myself and others also. Like core banking, somebody is provided. After that, I'm not sure how, as it is that setup they are taking and they are deploying in some other bank also. So definitely, it's very risky thing. And most of the thing, it is coming like okay, we can secure ourselves. It is our visibility. Anandji also mentioned like we don't know wherever my data is available and who is using and how it is getting access and all those. So definitely, it's a bigger thing, and definitely going forward trend also, this could not be avoided, like a vendor risk management, threat intel type of thing and all those things. It is I think it is going to contribute much. And the trend perspective, if you'll say any new trend, then again means my always it will be like it will be there some the basic things also, again human factor and all those things. I think it is again it is because in COVID also we have seen whatever the exploitation or something it has happened, most of the thing it is due to some of the other human error. Even though it's, I'll not say it's a mistake also, it's a like human error side also. Any misconfiguration something, any means people have not done that proper configuration, like cloud side something it has happened, any phishing wishing, again it will be part of this human sites only. So I think mostly this will be, probably it will be in a trend. And this, if we are in a position as a CISO, as an information security professionals, we are in a position to identify and mitigate those things. I think major chunk of those things we can be in a safer side probably.
So Akhil, since you mentioned about the human side as well as the other security issues side, so combining everything together, when you look at that comprehensive kind of attack emulation, then the kind of term that comes to the mind is red teaming, and maybe moving forward purple teaming. So do you think that red teaming or purple teaming is going to be a trend in the industry in the longer run?
Very much it is, because see, it's a traditional VAPT, like any organization when we are doing, and the way presently the things we are going in agile development and very fast thing it is happening. So as a point in state, any snapshot if we are taking, like if I am performing my VAPT monthly, quarterly, whatever, that time I am doing, that time I am getting my particular what is my security posture. Accordingly, I am getting the vulnerability, including myself and everyone. We are getting that vulnerability and we are doing that patching. But the thing is, the moment we are changing, suppose on 1st of January, this exercise has been done, by 10th, 15th, or whatever organization side, we have done that patching. Now we are thinking up to next 1st April, means after 3 months, we will perform that. But during this time, there are the very fast-paced changes. So if we are not performing that continuous changes, we are not performing, and definitely like earlier, my mindset also some 4 to 5 years back or 3 4 years back, and others also, red teaming and VAPT, normally it is using as a synonyms, but which is not actually. So it's a really, it's a lot of difference there. So if we are performing those things like VAPT and we are not doing that continuous assessment, then it is going to be the issue, and we will not be in a position to identify our exact vulnerability during the runtime. Coming to this purple team, blue team side, so one thing is there, I may be conflicting the some of the views also. Red teaming, blue team concept, it's very much whatever we are thinking in a red teaming side. Okay, whatever vulnerability and the threat I'm identifying, my red teaming people should be able to convince, or they should help the blue teaming people to uh, they should be having a better ability to detect and prevent those threats. In between that purple teaming it is coming, so that you can say it's like a mediator in between, who can uh, pass this knowledge to this particular, it's a coordination. Ideally it can be performed by the red teaming, or in between whatever teaming is there, means we can term is. So depends means how my organization is structured. If those coordination is very good, red teaming and blue team, then might be red teaming equal to purple team also, it can be. Otherwise one separate vertical, one separate team, it can be there. to sync in between those things. Otherwise, this is always, it could be some different vertical. We are performing attacker, you are the defender. Then this mindset, if it is a conflict is there, ultimately loss is for the organization. So one very interesting some article I was reading, some analogy it is mentioned on this red teaming and blue teaming and purple teaming. Like in restaurant, some chef is there. He is in a position to prepare very good dish. They are prepared, but it is not getting delivered to the customer. In between, one waiter is there. His job is there to get that thing from there and pass it to them. If that chef is also keeping that particular dish inside the kitchen, it is not getting delivered to that customer, then it's a waste. Okay, so I think here, if that person is in a position to deliver it, then there's no means need for the waiter. So I think that situation, just synchronization and the coordination, I think purple team exercise, and probably it is required in current mindset and current scenario. It will be required.
Great. So Akhil, just to add on top of what you mentioned, the conventional pen testing typically is like, here is my target system, which is the IP address or the application. Try to break into that and find out the flaws. So that is what pen testing is. But in case of red teaming, it is not based on a target system. It is based on an objective, that you are given an objective that whatever be the way, break into my organization. I will not give you the list of my assets, neither the applications. You figure out whatever be the way you could break in. So if pen
Exactly.
testing is like sending a missile to a specific hill to a target, then red teaming is like a full-fledged war where you have the
Exactly.
CIA
Exactly.
and the army and the air and the navy. So it's a much more holistic kind of
Exactly.
approach, where the rules of like just one single application or one single IP or a set of IPs, that is taken out of. You can attack the
Mm.
people, you can attack the applications, you can do multi-stage attack, you can collect threat intelligence, you can collect data from dark web, do whatever it takes, but go
Anything.
and try to
Exactly.
break in, right? And there
Exactly.
could be
So I
many
think we
different
can
objectives.
mention this way also. Yeah, yeah. VAPT is a subset of red teaming. That basis, I think, because that part it will come, but it is very holistic side. So anyway, it's a very
Exactly.
major means it's an umbrella item like web, whatever the process side, people side, technology, physically, whatever way you want, you have to break it somehow. So that is the
Exactly.
purpose.
And that's one good thing which RBI has done is, and in a way I actually appreciate RBI's move. I consider RBI probably, I mean, for many it could be painful, but it's a positive pain. Some pain makes you stronger, right? So RBI is probably one of those very um, for future thinking and very conservative regulators, and RBI has made red teaming mandatory for the banks, etc., which is a very interesting move. Not too many regulators have done that, which actually
Yeah, yeah.
shows that at least from the intent side, the Indian ecosystem is fairly good. At least there is a
Exactly.
proactive approach towards making things happen, which is a good thing. Now, the other thing which you mentioned, Akhil, is the continuous testing. Now, that is a very hard thing, right? Like continuous testing. So, what's your thought? Can you elaborate a little bit more on this, on the continuous testing side or continuous, like people might be doing this VA on a monthly basis or a daily basis, etc. So, what's the need for
So,
continuous testing?
for- yeah, so for me, continuous testing, you can say it's like we are means in general layman language. If we'll take instead of talking about this, we are as a security professional, we are continuously scanning our infrastructure, especially from the external side. One thing, like whatever my exposed thing, we are performing VA for our internal servers, PT for the external, or vice versa, both the thing. But arrangement like exactly term threat intelligence, if we can say, if anything is there which is my exposed, which is my known or unknown thing, both the thing. It's not like my I am giving some IP and after that people are scanning and any vulnerability I am getting it. That is also one part. But if any unknown thing is based on my domain, based on my any people's credentials, based on my email ID or anything, so that is scanning in complete 360 degree of that view for the organization. If anything is, because again, just like we were discussing in the red teaming side, threat could be from any side. It could be physical, it could be from the system side, anything. So if any such vulnerability, if any particular person is scanning continuously, that will be, I think, considered as a means continuous monitoring and the scanning per se. It could be active and passive, that basis whatever we can perform it. But so there is a slight difference between point in time VA and this continuous scanning.
Yeah. So I'll tell an interesting story. Quite a long time back, I mean, during my IIT Kharagpur days. So there used to be a set of hackers all hacking for fun within the campus, etc. So people used to have this as a strategy that for those target systems, they continuously would try to see what port is
Mm.
getting opened or stuff like that. And it's more or less on a continuous basis. They're trying to see, can I compromise somebody, right?
Mm.
Whereas if
Mm.
you look at an organization, they would do a VAPT exercise quarterly, monthly, etc. Now imagine if you have a nation state actor targeting you, or even a attacker who wants to specifically target you, or
Mm.
a ransomware guy who doesn't care whether you are a bank or whosoever, but is scanning through the entire internet on a continuous basis to find out specific
Mm.
ports and compromise. Now, in a scenario like that, the attacks are happening continuously, but our VA application testing, all these things are done regularly, whether weekly or quarterly or yearly. Now, obviously, I mean, that is like when we do such kind of infrequent test, it's like going to the war without any uh, bulletproof
Without
vest. I
preparation.
mean, it's a
Yeah, yeah.
or going to a gunfight with a knife. So
Mm.
if there is a determined attacker, that guy is going to compromise. So that is the reason why the industry is now moving towards how can we move to continuous testing. Now one might think, why not just run the regular nessus on a continuous basis? Now here is this problem: regular nessus cannot run continuously. It is not architected for that. So all our conventional tools are not architected to do continuous testing. They are architected to do regular testing, because continuous means you have to take the frequency at a different level, and you can't do things in a sequential manner. It's something like TCP versus UDP. These two protocols are designed
Mm.
for different purpose. So you have to then redesign all your scanners and re-architect all your scanners. So that is the reason why continuous security validation is not taking the old tools and running it more frequently. It just can't run it more frequently. Or you can't
Exactly,
take the
exactly.
regular tools and run the
And
internet wide scanning on the entire internet. That doesn't scale.
exactly,
So that is the
exactly.
reason why continuous security validation is emerging as a new market or a new set of
Mm.
technology, because the old
Mm.
technologies cannot scale. It cannot do. You just can't take up old
Mm.
tools and make it do this. So that's
Mm.
the reason why continuous security validation is becoming one of the key things in the industry. And it's not like using the regular old tools on a continuous manner. It's a new breed of tools which are coming up in this industry. Similarly, on the red teaming side, also new set of tools and automations are coming up in red teaming. Continuous automated red
Mm.
teaming is another emerging field. So these are some of the emerging fields which are, I guess these fields will take some time to mature over a period of time. It's not just
True.
2021. I guess this is going to take several years to mature, and our old school VAPT will eventually get changed to this new model. The old guys might acquire this new set of guys, or they might build the tools, but I strongly believe that's the future for a very simple reason: attackers are attacking us on continuous basis, so we should also test us continuously, right? So that's the logic. So here is something new to watch out for as a new set of technologies.
Yeah.
Let's move to Anant, what are some of your thoughts in terms of interesting new trends to watch out for?
See, for me, it will all be, as we have moved in the last 1 year to work from home and things like that, gone remote, the digital transformation, I think, is going to pick pace very, very fast, right? So the organizations will start focusing on a lot of digital focus, moving to the cloud. That is going to be something that's, bound to happen. And in the recent few months, I have also seen, identity and multi-factor authentication going a big transformation where they're saying password is no more the thing. They are going after the MFA. So multi-factor authentication. So you will be working with people whom you would have never met or will meet in person, right? So for you to have technology controls that can protect the organizations from any kind of wrong hands, falling into the wrong hands type, that's going to be a big thing that's going to happen in the 2021.
So you mean to say with this kind of digitization and remote working, the attack surface is changing, and you need to kind of watch out for. And I recall yesterday when we were chatting, you mentioned about this attack surface management. How do we kind of manage
Right.
this kind of new attack surface, which is continuously changing, and shadow IT? Do you also want to add something on that?
So basically, it all starts with understanding the asset list, asset inventory. Today, because of the flexibility to churn up new instances on the cloud, you know, some of the IT folks, the development folks or the business, they don't have to go through the IT process anymore to get a new server in place, right? So they go ahead and churn it up at their will and wish. Now, those things create a lot of attack surfaces on the, uh, you know, for a hacker. And one of the key things that we need is we need to some kind of use a digital asset discovery tool, something again part of the continuous security validation. We need to identify all our asset tools, misconfiguration, so some kind of a configuration validation that needs to happen. If those servers are supposed to be, exposed to internet or not, what are these? And then the most important of all is what is our, awareness program for people. So today, if in any of the large cloud instances, you don't have to log into a console. So there are these API scripts and links. If someone clicks on something, a new instance churns out and they get access. So it has become so easy. So how do you ensure that they are not falling victim to any phishing attack and misusing that kind of access? So continuous monitoring of external attack surface seems to be the holistic thing that we need to do.
Great. So to add to what you mentioned, Anand, so there's some interesting evolution of new technologies which are happening, or may not be all new, but more of adoption is happening because many of these technologies kind of came up some time back, but the industry is right now adopting in a much bigger way. So one is what you mentioned, which is attack surface management tools or ASM tools, which is digital asset inventory, etc. There's also a second type of tools which are technologies which are coming, which is internal asset inventory, which discovers your internal assets. That's another set of tools which are coming up. So it's two different type of technologies. Like for example, the set of tools which does the first doesn't do the second. Then also CASB can play a role in terms of discovering some type of shadow IT. Not all type. ASM discovers a type of shadow IT, CASB discovers a different type of shadow IT, and these two are very complementary. Then there is another set of tools which can be very powerful in terms of helping. This is CSPM, which is Cloud Security Posture Management, which integrates with the cloud and makes your digital asset inventory, etc. So in just this single field, there are many different technologies which are emerging, and each of these technologies has its own pros and cons, or what they cover and what they don't. But I just wanted to give a quick glimpse of what are the things which is happening here. And the last thing which I probably want to add is one of the interesting trends is risk-based vulnerability management. Now, a question might come, what's new in it? We are all risk professionals and we were doing vulnerability management. So what's new in risk-based vulnerability management, right? So the difference is like this, that if you look at the way we kind of consider the vulnerabilities, we rate them as high, medium, low, or critical, right? Critical, high, medium, low. So that's how vulnerabilities are rated. Now, the interesting thing is that a vulnerability which is a medium threat vulnerability in a specific asset uh, uh, um, uh, could be considered as high risk because of the criticality of that asset. Maybe that medium threat because it just can do a DOS, so you have rated that as medium. But if it is very critical, then you should now keep the risk as much higher, right? So a medium threat vulnerability here could be more important than a critical vulnerability in a non-critical system. Now, there could be another aspect where a high threat vulnerability, which is not critical, could be used in conjunction with some other vulnerability, or a medium threat, two medium threat vulnerabilities could be chained to discover a vulnerability in one system, and then from there you can do further attack chaining and break into. Now look at this. In the context of that attack path or that attack chaining, a medium threat vulnerability could be now elevated to higher risk. So our conventional scoring of CVSS or of WASP for high, medium, low, and critical doesn't really work, because you have to look at the vulnerability in the context. And how do you then do this risk scoring? Now, obviously, you can do this risk scoring by looking at every single risk and making a judgment. Now, as a senior security professional, you can make those judgments very easily. But look at these 100,000 vulnerabilities in a large organization that comes up from all these vulnerability management tools. Doing it at scale is not possible, right? So how do you then do that? So you need new set of tools, technology, automation, AI, etc., which can now prioritize such risks in a better way. So the vulnerability criticality has to be redefined in a context. And that's the reason why risk-based vulnerability management is emerging as a new set of technology. So that's another interesting new trend. So just to summarize this trend part, so we discussed about quite a few areas, which includes Akhil mentioned about red teaming, purple teaming. Akhil also mentioned about continuous security validation, continuous red teaming. Anant mentioned about attack surface management. I also spoke about other things like CSPM, CASB, or internal asset discovery tools, and risk-based vulnerability management. So we got some 6-7 interesting new trends to look out for in the vulnerability management field. So Akhil and Anant, do you want to add anything before we move to the next part, which is the critical capability?
One thing, this risk-based side, traditional way, whatever everybody is doing while performing this AppSec or VAPD or something, then OS we are referring. If any one vulnerability is mentioned without seeing the impact, like you have mentioned, medium vulnerability in some very high critical assets, it could be much more dangerous than its opposite side, like any high vulnerability in a less critical. So presently, I think whatever the trends are, whatever the standard way everybody is following or we are following, based on the naming convention without actually seeing the residual risk or exactly how the impact is there. I think that need to be a little bit changed, and based on what exactly the impact it could be, based on the asset value, I think once that is established, then it will be giving us a good direction move towards this risk base, and that could be the correct approach for this. Otherwise, always it's very fancy number for CISO. It's obviously means scary number, but yeah, okay, we have got this much issue in IT infrastructure, and it's very painful for the IT team. Okay, how to take care of those things? Whether really okay, this team is telling some 2,000, 3,000 high points are there. Whether really high or it could be more or less, we don't know because we don't measure that exactly the impact of those. So that need to be we need to move into that direction based on the impact and the probability side.
Great, wonderful. So thanks, Akhil. So let's move to the next part, which is the critical capability. Now, of course, when we think of the critical capability, many of these emerging trends which we mentioned will become part of it. So what we could do is let's kind of list down those critical capabilities. So in case you want to just mention these as names which we already explained in the previous part of the discussion, we don't need to explain, just name those. And if there's something new which we haven't discussed, please feel free to explain. So let's start with Anant this time. So Anant, what are some of the critical capabilities that you consider an organization should have as a part of their vulnerability management program for the future, which can cope up with today's threats?
So it's a combination of more like a people process technology. I think once you know what the vulnerabilities are, how soon can you remediate that? That has to be a process driven or a technology driven solution that has to be in place. One. Second thing is once anyone goes through some kind of a pre-production validation, and we know what's going on, or some data is going out of the organization, somewhere the security team needs to play a role, but more like getting involved in those discussions and setting up the appropriate controls in line, and so it's better managed and better controlled. So I think these are the two things. If organizations can do, then they are in a better position, and the security team or the CISO will have a better view of where all the attack surfaces are and how it can be protected.
Great. And Akhil, do you want to add some more things outside of what Anant mentioned?
Yeah, it's covered, but yeah, like he has mentioned, security by design concept. One thing is always means involvement of the security team. It should be from the beginning. So that one thing is a very much it's a basic concept of infosec. Another one thing probably we can see like testing at an early stage. Like whenever if any means development is there, means we cannot substitute this with the complete integration testing. But yeah, whenever if any development, and that time whenever we are calling an agile and other things, so that time involvement of the UAT and QA and the security during that time, and then going forward patching, and after that, then probably once in solution if you are testing, probably it could give us some less number of issue. And obviously when less number of issue for organization, it will take some lesser time to do that thing. So one thing is, I think, security by design concept, and start testing also during the initial stage. Probably that also it could be added.
Great, great. So let me do one thing based on the pointers which both of you mentioned. Let me try to build this as a kind of single framework or a kind of reference architecture. I'm using the word kind of because it's not exactly one. So let's consider a scenario where I'll give an example. Like I'm part of the advisory board for a few companies, for advisor to the CISOs. And I'm quite happy being an advisor. I don't envy any of your roles. So one of the things which, like when I'm looking at the building up the vulnerability management program, so the way I kind of structure it in my head. So I'll talk about that, and Anant and Akhil, you guys feel free to kind of pitch in. So the first thing which I would look for is knowing my list of assets, right? So how do I build my asset inventory? And none of the organizations where I have, I mean, interacted in whatever be the form, and we have interacted in various ways. In my previous venture, 18 out of the top 20 US banks were working with us. So I can just tell you, none of the organizations, CISOs, ever said, I know all the assets. I mean, it's a hard problem, if not impossible. So, but whatever you know, how do you put together and create a proper asset register, an asset inventory? That's step one. And then classification of that asset inventory based on criticality, business criticality. So asset inventory creation, then business criticality. And then the third very important thing, which is again another unsolved problem in the industry, and that's another reason why I don't envy the CISO role, is data flow. None of the large organization knows where data is and how is it flowing. But then at least building a structure for that. It may not be perfect, but I would first start with building my asset inventory, building my data inventory, which can be part of that. How does the data flow? Then access, who got access where, and stuff like that. So that is the first part, and having a high level architecture diagram, putting everything into the context. So that's one. Then the next part is creating a framework or a program that these assets which belong to this group should be tested this frequently. That is one. And second is that these business critical assets testing should be at this depth. So I typically like breaking things down in the testing program into two parts. One is frequency of testing and the other is depth of testing. And I'll give you an example for depth of testing for application security testing. If you're doing, suppose DAST, only DAST, you can do just an automated tool-based DAST. You can do automated tool-based plus false positive removal. That could be, say, level 2. Level 3 could be level 2 plus go and do the business logic testing, right? Level 4 could be where you go and also do like deeper architecture review and stuff like that. So you can create various levels and depth of testing, and you tie it up with the type of assets, so that now you have a program that, okay, these are my assets, this is the business criticality for this type of assets, this is my kind of testing frequency. Now comes the other point which Anant mentioned, that is testing is not enough, right? I should also have my SLA in terms of remediation. So which level of criticality in which asset should be remediated within what time frame? Now that is another SLA which you have to discuss with the stakeholders and agree on, and then look for where all are we missing those. So building a program where we have a structured framework like this, because if we are doing continuous testing, I don't need continuous testing on all my assets. Probably it's a good idea to do continuous digital asset inventory. That is very important, because I may not know through which window, which I don't know, hacker might break into, right? But when it comes to some of the internal assets, I don't need continuous. Or the depth of testing on 5 of my critical assets could be much deeper, whereas much shallow depth for the other assets. So building this and architecting this is the first most important step. And then once you have that architecture, you can then choose the right kind of tools for that. So I think the program comes first, and tools and processes and people, everything comes later. So first we should start with designing the program, and once we have designed, then we look into, okay, this is what my budget is. Based on my budget, I can do this. And if suppose I cannot do this, I would always go and suggest the CISO, where I'm say part of the advisory board, that please go and explain the risk of not doing that to the management, that if we don't do this, this is the risk which is there, and there should be an acceptance of the risk. So maintain a risk register where that risk is accepted by the management. So in that way, you don't take all the load of security management on in your head, because as a CISO, we you will take all the responsibility, right? So you also have to pass on the responsibility if you don't get the right support. So maintaining that risk register and making the management approve those risks is very important. You cannot approve risk as a CISO or as a security professional. Management has to approve the risk. And the final thing which I have seen is very, very helpful is doing drills with the key stakeholders, a crisis drill. So what interesting happens in that crisis drill is, one is you get to know that if a crisis happens, how prepared are we? That's one. Second thing that happens is, through that process, now you are better prepared. But the third and very delightful thing that happens is that all the stakeholders understand what big pain they will face if a breach happens. Today, the call center guy or the operations guy might not understand that if a breach happens, that there will be a flood of calls and that person will not be able to handle it. Today, the engineering guys may not know if the system goes down, the DR site cannot be brought up. If it cannot be, then every minute we are going to lose this much of money. So the moment you do that crisis drill, all the stakeholder alignment also happens. So these are three big advantages of doing a kind of crisis drill. So broadly, this is a kind of framework where I tried to put together all the things which you guys mentioned into a single kind of reference architecture. So Akhil and Anand, do you want to add anything into this?
No, I think everything, I think pretty much it's covered. Yeah.
I think you summarized it well, Bikash.
Yeah.
Thanks. So before we conclude, and also all our participants, if any of you want to add some thoughts of yours, which could either be a question or even a remark, please feel free to just post it here, and then we'll just see if we could activate your speakers so that you could either speak, or if it is a question, we'll try to answer that. So please feel free to post your questions or comments. And the final thing, Akhil and Anand, what do you consider are some of the success factors?
Yeah. So for me, I think it's uh, two things we can mention. Like one thing, ownership by the stakeholder and the management, or you can say in a two parts, management support and the stakeholders, like their ownership, identification, and then only whatever you have summarized also. And the last thing, I think it could be proper governance of those things, like how we are monitoring, how we are starting, and how we are completely means overlooking all those things, means completely oversighting, or means doing the monitoring for those things. I think that could be the better success factor for this.
Yeah, because just to add, having a right architecture in place, security analysis, things like that. Awareness is something which is, which cannot be a one-time thing, right? It has to be a continuous awareness and the competency of the people. So people process technology plays a very significant role in success factors, and the ability to work with a changing, business or the dynamics of the organizations.
Great. So please feel free to ask some questions. So I mean, I'll pick up those questions and ask. I'll take it up and discuss with all of you. So any of the persons, any of the attendees, participants, please feel free to both comment as well as ask any question. So one question, and any of you can take up. So what are some of your thoughts on how to do shadow IT risk management?
Very, very interesting question. There is no silver bullet to this. It's only combination of what kind of internal process and how we at different stages in the system. So when a security analyst sees a threat or he sees a traffic going into an IP, he should be able to bring it to the right forum for us to further investigate. So all this shadow IT stuff in one way or the other starts off as an incident, and then it finally figure out, okay, there is some server sitting there and that is what it is. So there is no fixed solution. It all depends on the people and their ability to identify what is not a normal.
And how do you detect that? I mean, one is like, suppose there is an incident, but outside of an incident, how do you typically detect such kind of anomalies?
Yeah, that's right. So basically, SOC plays a significant role. Many organizations might not even have a SOC. So one thing that I have seen, in my experience, the tools and the infrastructure, the logs will tell quite a lot of story. Many a times we tend to ignore it or we don't analyze it. So I think that has to be strengthened for us to identify any kind of anomaly.
Great. And Akhil, do you want to add anything on top of this?
Yeah, so I think whatever you are summarizing for this architecture, so like asset inventory, overflow, and all those things. Then after that, if we will combine with this log monitoring or any particular incident or any abnormality, if we are having particular our baseline, which we know, okay, that should be our flow, that should be our inventory. If after that, due to the incident, due to any log thing, due to any abnormality, which I am getting alert from the SOC or NOC, and accordingly if any base is there, so that time again we have to go back and update our infrastructure. Definitely, as Ananju has mentioned correctly, it's a no silver bullet and it's a pain area for everyone, and probably it could be forever. I mean, so shadow ID means always it's like shadow ID means shadow ID only. Means it's a not known thing. And unless until it is not known, means we don't know. We are considering, okay, we know each and everything. I am having 100 asset. This is the one. Suddenly something, if it is coming to the organization as a surprise, okay, 1 DB was down or something, and now suddenly it is coming up and flow is going to that side. As per the process, as per the governance structures, we have to go back and update our infrastructure and update our the data flow diagram and all those things, which again it is coming back to your whatever you are summarizing for the means architecture side.
Great. So we see a couple of more questions, but before we get to the other questions, I'll quickly summarize. So if you have to do a shadow IT risk management, it's a combination of multiple processes, tools, etc. So the tools could be attack surface management. You could also use CASB. I mean, both together because it's complementary, internal asset inventory. But outside of that, just even a simple Excel sheet or a IT asset management tool, that is also very helpful. So you have to start somewhere, building that asset inventory, then having that right kind of governance in place so that people follow those rules and processes and you catch them if they don't. And the other thing is also detecting through SOC, etc. So that's broadly the kind of framework that has come up. The next question which we can see is when you say about automation tool for integration and fixing of vulnerabilities, how far is it practically possible? So if I have understood it right, it is like we are discovering vulnerabilities, but is it practically possible to fix it automatically is the question. Any of you want to take it up?
Yeah. So it's a depends. Like partially we can say something is feasible, something maybe we need some manual intervention. If I had also understood correctly, like automatically detection and then after that patching. Okay, so patching means definitely we should means blindly we cannot say okay whatever we are getting and after that directly we are going and applying that required whatever the suggestions are coming. Definitely there manual intervention, but yeah, some of the things are there like patch or something, any critical patches and it has been tested, then we can push as per the automated solution and this can be fixed. But probably for me at least my experience complete end to end it could be means slightly it's a
Yeah.
differ like complete automation probably.
Yeah. So for a few cases where, I mean, you can test it in a test system and then release it in all the systems, that is possible. But when it comes to application level vulnerabilities, those are all unique, right? So in those cases, it's going to be hard to make it scale like that. So the answer is yes, it is partially possible as of today. In future, My guess is it's going to be partially, but the partiality will increase in the sense more percentage will be automated.
Yeah,
But always there will be something which will not be able to automate. Yes, Anand.
yeah. So because I just want to add, you know, automating a remediation for a vulnerability, I feel will not be a good idea at all. I'll tell you why. Sometimes some of these remediations, if you push it, it will ask for a reboot of a system, right? Or it could be, about changing some keys in the Windows system or making some permission changes in the Unix system, which will have a massive impact. And we could have island of systems where people will not be able to even log in. So I think automated remediation should be avoided as much as possible. That's my view.
Okay, yeah. So you, I'm sure, have handled a lot of painful patches. Yeah. So in a certain type of patches, definitely automation will be hard. But those low criticality systems, etc., where I mean, such kind of disruptions will be less. If we can scale, that will be good. But in highly critical cases, it might be hard. So the last question, and if there's any more question, you may please feel free to post it, but we'll probably try to answer it to you privately over email. The last question is, what are some of the ways by which you could convince the management to get right kind of budget? So how do you get the budget? How do you convince management? That's the question. Any tricks
Again,
which
it's
you
no,
guys have?
yeah. So again, it's no single answer for this, but yeah, trick we can say giving the reference of old incident or the industry peer side baseline. Okay, this type of incident it has cost like this much, and now thanks to the COVID and other thing, we are having a lot of that examples which we can put in front of the management and different breach in all the industries. In this industry, this happened actually cost this much. This solution it is going to cost this much, and giving a peaceful time also. So all those things I think proper whenever we are means telling it's very easy like cost benefit analysis, but yeah, mentioning into a figure sometimes it's a difficult, but probably it could be one single liner giving the reference of some breaches, some security incident. I think it could be the good thing.
Anant, you
So,
want to add anything?
because I mean, I think you mentioned about having as a CISO, you are not supposed to be agreeing on the risk. Your job is to only present the risk to the management and will sign off. I think
Not
that
only,
will be the
not only. I mean, you have to push also. I don't mean like
no, I
just
think no, I
coming
think
out of
yeah.
that.
So no, that's fine. So what I was trying to say is, I think presenting the risk is crucial. Budget actually comes later because sometimes what I have seen out of my own experience is when I present a risk, saying that this is a risk that we have to mitigate, organizations might take a different view and say, you know what, we might not need that system. Why don't you just shut it down?
Got it. So what you mean to say is just like risk-based vulnerability management. You mean to say risk-based uh, budget approval?
Yes,
Yes, budget
yeah,
approval.
yeah, risk-based budget approval. So only then I
Yes.
think management will be convinced. If you go and say I need $1 million, I don't think they're going to approve it.
Wonderful. Great. So thanks, Akhil. Thanks, Anand. Thanks, everybody who joined us today. I think it was a very interesting discussion. Just to very quickly summarize, we talked about some of those breaches and the way it is rising today, despite all these tools, etc. And the key kind of takeaway in terms of trends, which we discussed in terms of those technology trends, future looking trends. Uh, it was continuous security validation, red teaming and purple teaming, doing it in a collaborative manner with the red and blue teams, risk-based vulnerability management, attack surface discovery, shadow IT, etc. These are some of the key trends which we discussed. In terms of building that reference architecture, we spoke about starting from building how to create a kind of architecture where you build the asset inventory, understand the data flow, do the right classification, and then build a program of which asset should be tested, how frequently, to what depth, and what should be the SLA for the remediation, and also focusing on doing drills and stakeholder management. So we discussed about a lot of very interesting ideas today. The session shall be available as recording in future. So we would look forward to more such interesting conversations. Thanks a lot, Akhil. Thanks a lot, Anand. Thanks all of you who
Uh,
joined us today.